Mistress came, looking for the millionaire, but pregnant wife's sharp words made her flee in panic. Melissa's heart thundered in her chest the moment she saw that woman step through the lavish marbled foyer of the Montclair Estate. The other woman, in her tailored red dress and sky-high heels, wore a triumphant smirk. Everyone in the city whispered about her, the bold mistress who dared threaten the most powerful couple on the East Coast. They said a confrontation was inevitable, and now here she was. But little did she know, behind Melissa's poised composure and gentle smile lay a steely resolve. Pregnant and fiercely protective, Melissa was determined that no one, absolutely no one, would tear her family apart. The Montclair Estate soared against the skyline, an impressive piece of architecture perched atop a manicured hill just outside Manhattan. Visitors often likened it to a grand castle. The swirling rumor mills buzzed for weeks, hinting that someone uninvited was planning to show up. Only the staff and the Montclair family themselves knew how tense the atmosphere had become inside those golden halls. Melissa Montclair, known formally as Melissa Parker before marrying Adrian Montclair, sat in the estate's library. She was a graceful woman in her late 20s, hair the color of mahogany softly pinned back, highlighting the classic angles of her face. She was reading a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, a novel she often turned to for comfort. The gentle hush of the room was a perfect background for her, yet her mind strayed to the tension that had enveloped her life in recent weeks. Her gaze periodically lifted from the pages to rest upon the gilded clock on the mantel. Each tick heightened her anxiety. She was 8 months pregnant, her body often exhausted, her ankles a bit swollen, and her senses more attuned to every nuance that could threaten her family. For some time, she had heard rumors about a cunning mistress weaving her way toward the Montclair fortune. Initially, Melissa brushed them aside, refusing to believe Adrian, her adoring husband, could ever betray her. But as the swirling gossip morphed into something more concrete, and as malicious phone calls to the estate began, she started to realize there might be truth behind the whispers. Adrian had become distant, seemingly burdened by a secret he couldn't easily share. And that secret had a name: Loretta Pierce. Their butler, Mr. Garrison, ventured into the library quietly. At nearly 70, with silver hair and impeccable posture, he had a paternal way of caring for everyone under the Montclair roof. Clearing his throat softly, he said, "Madam, I thought you might like some tea, and perhaps a snack for the little one." His eyes flickered to Melissa's belly with a gentle smile. Melissa returned his warmth, though her smile was tinged with weariness. "Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I think I'll need all the comfort I can get today." Mr. Garrison hesitated, clearly struggling with whether to say more. Finally, he spoke in a low, concerned tone. "We've received a call on the estate's main line." The woman insisted on seeing Mr. Montclair. She was most forceful. A flicker of distress crossed Melissa's face. She closed the novel, her hands trembling slightly. "So she's coming," she murmured. "Mr." Garrison nodded solemnly and left with a small bow. Melissa turned to stare out the massive library windows. The manicured lawns, rose bushes, and the graceful fountain shimmering at the center of the driveway only emphasized the wealth that surrounded her. She exhaled slowly. Her unborn child gave a tiny kick inside her, as if sensing her tension. "It will be all right," she whispered, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. "I won't let anything happen to you." Adrian Montclair was a self-made millionaire, having grown from humble roots in rural Pennsylvania to become the founder of Montclair International, a global conglomerate that owned everything from luxury hotels to technology startups. People admired him for his philanthropic endeavors, sponsoring scholarships, building medical wings in hospitals, and more. One such wing bore his name at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, making him a recognized patron of health and education. Yet behind Adrian's philanthropic image lay a complicated personal life. Before marrying Melissa, he had endured a reckless youth and several short-lived affairs. He was charismatic, always drawing attention without trying. Some of those old flames had long been extinguished, but apparently one still smoldered dangerously: Loretta Pierce. Loretta's name began to swirl back into Adrian's life 6 months ago. She was a socialite known for her manipulative charm. Gossips claimed she'd parted ways with him years before, but she never forgot him or the Montclair fortune. Melissa remembered the night Adrian sat her down in the very same library, guilt etched across his face. He confessed that Loretta had reappeared, threatening to leak falsehoods to the tabloids. She claimed she had proof of an ongoing liaison. Adrian insisted he had done nothing wrong, swearing it was all a scheme. To Melissa's credit, she believed him, though her heart ached with lingering doubts. Now, with each tick of that mantle clock, the dreaded meeting drew near. Melissa could not understand why Loretta was so bold, but she suspected the cunning woman had discovered her pregnancy and wanted to strike at the most vulnerable moment. It was shortly after lunchtime when Loretta Pierce arrived. Dressed in a form-fitting red midi dress, black stilettos, and brandishing a designer clutch, she swept into the foyer as if she owned the estate. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, and she wore a fragrance so potent it almost coated the air around her. A cluster of staff attempted to block her path, explaining that Mr. Montclair was unavailable without an appointment. Loretta narrowed her eyes, her expression turning vicious. "Unhand me," she hissed, pulling her arm free. "I am not here to see the staff, I am here to see Adrian. Move aside." At that moment, Adrian himself strode into the foyer with long, determined steps. He glared at Loretta, a swirl of emotions in his hazel eyes: anger, frustration, and perhaps a sliver of regret for ever letting her into his life. "I thought I made it clear, Loretta," he said, voice tight. "You have no business barging into our home." Loretta's red lips curled into a half-smile. "You never did like following your own rules, Adrian," she purred, taking a step closer. "And you certainly never minded me barging into your life before." Adrian's jaw clenched. "That was a long time ago. I have a family now. My wife is pregnant." Loretta's smile stiffened, but before she could summon a witty retort, Melissa stepped forward from the library doors. Wearing a simple but elegant white maternity dress, she moved with careful grace despite her advanced pregnancy. Her hand rested protectively on her abdomen. Loretta gave her a withering once-over. "So, this is the saintly Melissa," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "And here I imagined a woman with more presence, given all the stories I've heard." Melissa refused to let Loretta's taunt get under her skin. "I'm sorry to disappoint you," she replied calmly, "but your presence here is neither expected nor welcome. Please leave." Loretta let out a breathy laugh, turning her pointed gaze back to Adrian. "Don't tell me I've just caught you at a bad time," she cooed, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from her perfectly manicured nails. "You and I both know the truth about us." Adrian's face paled slightly, as though his composure was a thin layer of ice that Loretta could shatter with a single blow. But Melissa took a step between them, her chin lifted, eyes fierce. "As I said," Melissa repeated, her voice cutting through the tension, "please leave. Whatever you have to say can be said through our lawyers. Or is there some reason you've decided to corner my husband in his own home while I'm standing here, pregnant with his child, and listening to your accusations?" The staff standing around in the foyer seemed to hold their breath, uncertain of how quickly the confrontation might escalate. Loretta's confident facade rippled. She clearly had not anticipated such direct confrontation from the supposedly demure Melissa. For a moment, her boldness faltered, but only briefly. I intend to say what I came here to say, Loretta retorted, spiking each word with venom. And no pregnant woman is going to boss me around. Despite the twisting knots of anxiety inside her, Melissa maintained her composure. Then say it, she said simply, or leave. Loretta's eyes flicked back and forth, as though searching for the best angle to exploit. Fine. You asked for it, she hissed. Adrian, I'm pregnant too, and it's yours. A hush fell over the foyer. Melissa felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. She saw Adrian's face, drained of color, shock evident. Loretta had dropped her bombshell, and now the tension roiled like a storm about to break. The air felt heavy enough to slice with a knife. Adrian's gaze snapped to Melissa's. Her face was pale, eyes wide in disbelief. For a moment, neither could speak, but Loretta wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her harsh stiletto clacking on the marble floor. You see why I'm here now? Loretta said coolly. I'm carrying your husband's child, Melissa. You claim I have no place in his life, but that's about to change. There's no way to hide this. I'm well into my first trimester. Adrian found his voice at last, though it trembled with fury. Are you out of your mind, Loretta? We haven't been together since years before my marriage. And you expect me to believe this child is mine? Loretta let out an exaggerated sigh. Do you really want to open this can of worms, Adrian? I'm sure the tabloids would have a field day, especially with your philanthropic image. The world would be fascinated to see you painted as a deadbeat father. Melissa clenched her fist at her side, trying to remain calm for the sake of her own health and her unborn baby. She took a slow breath. Then let's get a paternity test, she said softly, but firmly. You can attempt to humiliate us, but we can just as easily clear Adrian's name if the child isn't his. Loretta's lips parted in a sneer. Oh, I intend to. In fact, I already have preliminary results from a discreet clinic, she lied, brandishing an envelope from her clutch. If you'd like to read them. Adrian snatched the envelope and ripped it open, scanning the contents. His brow furrowed. Melissa's heart pounded. She prayed to every benevolent force in the universe that whatever Loretta was claiming was a fabrication. His face twisted in confusion. This test is worthless, he said, voice shaking with rage. These results are incomplete. There's no official record or doctor's signature. This is some fake document you probably had typed up in a back alley. Loretta shrugged, unruffled. Then we'll do another at a facility of your choosing. But that won't negate the fact I'm expecting, Adrian. She turned her piercing stare on Melissa. And if you think I'm just going to quietly disappear, you're naive. I deserve compensation. And I deserve more than hush money because this baby, I am sure it's Adrian's, entitles me to a piece of the Montclair fortune. Melissa could feel her own child kicking ferociously within her, as if the baby sensed the tension too. She stepped closer to Loretta, dropping her voice to a sharp whisper. I've tried to be civil. I tried to spare you the humiliation of being thrown out by security. But hear me now, I won't let you hurt my husband, my child, or my family. If you persist in this charade, you'll find out exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine. Loretta narrowed her eyes. She was clearly caught off guard by Melissa's unwavering resolve. You talk a big game, but we both know men are weak, she scoffed, flicking her gaze to Adrian. He'll bend to my demands sooner or later. Adrian, summoning his composure, nodded to the security personnel. Escort Miss Pierce out. She'll be hearing from our attorneys. Loretta stood her ground for a split second, her eyes locked on Melissa. Then, lips curling in a malevolent smirk, she allowed the guards to gently direct her toward the door. As she disappeared from view, the echo of her voice lingered in the foyer. You've not seen the last of me. With Loretta gone, an uneasy stillness draped over the estate. Adrian turned to Melissa, longing to embrace her, but unsure if she'd let him. Before he could speak, tears began to brim in Melissa's eyes. She held her composure for a heartbeat longer, then turned and fled into the library. That evening, the Montclair household was subdued. Even the staff sensed the shift in energy. Usually, the Montclairs hosted dinners, entertained business associates, or at least shared a calm, affectionate mealtime. But tonight, dinner was served in silence, with Adrian and Melissa seated across from each other at a long dining table. The clink of silverware was the only sound, tension sitting heavily between them. Melissa touched her fork to her lips, then set it down. The aroma of roasted vegetables and prime filet usually excited her appetite, but the persistent worry made her stomach twist uncomfortably. "Adrian," she ventured softly, "we need to talk about this. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." He nodded, pushing aside his half-eaten meal. "I know. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to do this in front of the staff." Melissa sighed and gestured for him to follow her into the adjacent sitting room. Once there, she settled onto a plush couch, where she felt more comfortable physically. Adrian sat next to her, and for a moment neither spoke. The flicker of the fireplace cast dancing shadows across the walls. "It's been years since I was involved with Loretta," Adrian began quietly. "I was foolish back then. There was never any genuine love, only fleeting attraction. I ended it long before I met you." Melissa studied him, searching for answers in the lines of his face. She had known Adrian to be many things: ambitious, strong-willed, tender beneath his confident exterior. But she had also sensed he carried regrets from his past. "Is there any chance," Melissa asked, "that she could be telling the truth? Could you have met her again, even once, without my knowledge?" Adrian's eyes flared with hurt. "No," he said firmly, though the muscle in his jaw ticked in frustration. "Melissa, I swear, I've never strayed from you, not even for a second." Her shoulders slumped in relief, though uncertainty still lingered. "Then she's lying," Melissa concluded, sliding her hand over her belly in a protective gesture. "But we need real proof she's lying. She'll keep up this act. And she's cunning enough to forge documents. She may bribe doctors to confirm the child is yours." Adrian nodded. "I know. A paternity test at a reputable facility is our only path, but that can only happen once the baby is born. In the meantime, she can claim anything she wants." Melissa's eyes flickered with defiance. "We must brace ourselves then. I won't let her overshadow the birth of our child. And I don't want you to ever doubt my loyalty. If you tell me you're innocent, I believe you wholeheartedly." Emotions flashed across Adrian's face: gratitude, relief, lingering sadness. He lifted Melissa's hand, kissing it gently. "Thank you," he murmured. "I promise I will make sure you and our baby are safe, no matter what Loretta tries." Despite the comforting weight of Adrian's words, Melissa felt a storm gathering around them. That night, sleep came fitfully for both. In the haze of exhaustion, Melissa kept dreaming of Loretta's cold laughter echoing in the Montclair halls, swirling with threats to tear them apart. Over the next few weeks, the Montclairs tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Adrian's schedule was chaotic, filled with urgent meetings to close a major acquisition deal. Melissa busied herself with preparations for the baby, but her joy was overshadowed by worry. She also noticed staff whispering behind her back signs that the rumor of Loretta's claim had already begun to spread among them. During a routine prenatal appointment, Melissa spoke with her obstetrician, Dr. Ramirez, who also worked in the Adrian Montclair wing at Mount Sinai Hospital. In the hushed sanctuary of the examination room, the older woman with gentle eyes placed a reassuring hand on Melissa's shoulder. "You're under a lot of stress, Doctor," Ramirez observed, glancing at the monitor where Melissa's baby's heartbeat pulsed steadily. "This can't be good for you, or the baby." Melissa's eyes welled with tears. "My husband is being blackmailed," she whispered, relieved to speak the truth to someone outside the immediate family. "I'm terrified of how this could affect us. Dr. Ramirez softened her voice. Focus on your own health first. If you're not well, you can't handle anything else. Remember, even the wealth of the Montclair family doesn't prevent heartbreak or illness if you ignore emotional stress. Melissa nodded. She forced herself to breathe deeply and banish the swirling anxieties for that moment, at least. Melissa's attempt at tranquility was short-lived. One late afternoon, a black sedan pulled up to the Montclair gates. The staff, wary of uninvited guests, were quick to spot Loretta stepping out. This time, she clutched a thick folder and wore a smug grin. "I have an appointment," she lied to the guard. Mr. Montclair and I arranged a meeting. Predictably, the guard summoned Adrian. Through the security monitor, Adrian watched Loretta standing outside the gates. Her posture was casual, but the folder in her hands looked ominous. He sighed, turning to Melissa. "She's back. Should I send her away?" Melissa pressed her lips together. "We can't keep avoiding her," she said quietly. "She'll only escalate things. We have to handle this head-on." So Adrian agreed to let Loretta in, albeit with security flanking her. This time, they met in the estate's drawing room, an elegant space with high ceilings, plush sofas, and tall windows allowing the golden light of dusk to spill across the floors. Loretta took a seat uninvited, crossing her legs. She placed the folder on her lap, tapping it for effect. "I have to hand it to you, Adrian," she said, her tone a silken threat. "You're persistent in ignoring me, but that's going to be impossible after today." Melissa, standing near the doorway with her arms folded across her chest, kept her expression neutral. "If you have something to say, Loretta, say it quickly." Loretta opened the folder, flipping through a few documents. Adrian noticed some pages bearing official logos, possibly from Montclair International. "I've done some digging," she revealed with a smug wink. "I have emails, text messages, everything that suggests you've funneled money into hush funds before. Bribes to employees who threatened lawsuits, maybe. Or hush money to women who intended to come forward with a pregnancy scare." She gave a mocking shrug. "Hard to say, but it would be quite the scandal to see Montclair International facing a public inquiry. Imagine the headlines: philanthropist pays off secret mistresses, or something equally sensational." Adrian clenched his fists. "That's a violation of my company's private data. You must have hacked something." Loretta's smirk only widened. "A friend of mine is an expert in digital forensics. You'd be amazed how easy it is to unearth hidden tidbits, Adrian. Let's just say your squeaky clean image has a few questionable bullet points. Now, I'm offering you a chance to keep this under wraps. If you sign over a certain sum, let's call it a family trust for my unborn child, perhaps, I'll conveniently forget to pass these documents to the press." Melissa stepped forward, eyes ablaze. "And if we call your bluff?" she challenged. "If we let you leak these so-called documents to the media, how do we know you won't slither back with more demands?" Loretta shrugged elegantly. "You don't. But if you refuse now, you'll have more to lose. The Montclair name will be tarnished. Future investors might doubt Adrian's ethics. It'll cost you more in the long run." Adrian inhaled, measured, tamping down the urge to explode. "You mentioned a sum," he said coldly. "Name it." Loretta tapped a manicured finger against her lips. $50 million. A fraction of the Montclair fortune, but enough for me to ensure my child, your child, never wants for anything. Melissa gave a derisive laugh. "You're insane if you think we'll just hand over that amount without proof that child is Adrian's." Loretta arched a brow. "Your husband's skeletons aren't limited to me alone. You might want to think carefully, Melissa. The Montclair brand is a beacon of philanthropy, but that light can be snuffed out by scandal." Adrian felt a protective fury surge within. He'd seen unscrupulous business rivals, but Loretta's blend of personal vendetta and greed stoked an even deeper anger. We won't pay a single cent until your baby's paternity is confirmed by an independent test, administered by a physician we trust," he said. Loretta's face flickered with annoyance. "Then I suppose we're at an impasse, but the clock is ticking. My friend in the press can't wait for this bombshell." She shut the folder, stood and walked toward the door, pausing in front of Melissa. Their gazes clashed, two women vying for the future of one man and his empire. "Tick-tock," Loretta whispered, then sauntered out, escorted by security. That night, while Melissa was resting in the living room, Loretta's voice emerged again, this time on the phone. She called the estate late, bypassing the staff by using a personal line Adrian once provided her. Melissa picked up, her heart pounding. "How convenient you answered, Melissa," Loretta drawled through the receiver. "I have a final proposition for you, woman to woman." Melissa clenched the phone, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I'm listening." Loretta gave a theatrical sigh. "I'm giving you an opportunity to remain in that golden cage with your baby while I take Adrian to raise my child. Do you want to set him free to do the right thing and be a father to us? Or do you intend to cling to your illusions?" There was a moment of crystalline silence, and then Melissa's temper, coiled for weeks, snapped. She rose from the couch, pacing the room with ferocity. "Listen carefully, Loretta," she said, voice shaking with controlled rage. "You waltz into our lives with your outlandish claims, brandishing blackmail and illusions of grandeur. But you have no place here. My husband has done everything to be honorable, to build this legacy, and I will not allow a venomous vulture like you to tear it apart for a dime." Loretta's breathing hitched, but Melissa wasn't finished. "You talk of woman to woman? You don't deserve that courtesy. You are a liar who preys on insecurities. I'm telling you now, you will never replace me. You will never have Adrian's heart. And if you continue this charade, you'll walk away empty-handed, exposed, and humiliated. Do you think society will welcome you with open arms once your schemes are revealed? Once they see you as the gold-digging fraud you truly are?" Melissa's voice sliced with razor-sharp precision. "I've tried to keep calm, tried to be kind, but you have pushed me too far. If you dare come near my family again, you'll regret it. Because I don't just have wealth on my side, I have the truth. And the truth will destroy you more thoroughly than any hush money or scandal can. You have been warned." A stunned silence hissed through the phone line. Finally, Loretta managed to scoff, but it was hollow, uncertain. "We'll see who's ruined in the end," she snapped, and hung up. Melissa stood by the phone, heart hammering, adrenaline coursing through her. She pressed a hand to her belly and felt the baby moving. That surge of motherly protectiveness fueled her words. Indeed, for the first time, she truly felt no fear. She'd been tested and stood firm. The next few days, Melissa decided that enough was enough. She wouldn't hide in the estate any longer. She needed to face the rumor mill head-on and gather the Montclair circle of trusted allies to stand against Loretta's manipulations. A meticulously arranged dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in New York City was the setting where Melissa extended invitations to close friends, prominent lawyers, and a handful of board members from Montclair International. The group convened in a private dining room, an opulent space with shimmering chandeliers and discreet staff. As the guests arrived, many expressed concern for Melissa, noting her advanced pregnancy. But she insisted she was fine and had urgent matters to discuss. Among those present was Joanna Mitchell, an old friend of Melissa's and a skilled investigative journalist turned corporate communications specialist. Also in attendance was Richard Albright, Montclair International's chief legal counsel, and his associate, Cynthia Bloom, who specialized in crisis management. When everyone had settled, Melissa stood her posture straight despite the heaviness of her pregnancy. She briefly relayed Loretta's claims and her blackmail attempts. Concern and shock rippled around the table. Richard cleared his throat. This is a serious threat. If Loretta can produce any credible documentation, real or fabricated, and feed it to the tabloids, Montclair International's stock could take a hit, not to mention the blow to Adrian's personal reputation. Joanna raised a hand. I have contacts at multiple media outlets. If we can get in front of the story, offer a straightforward statement that Loretta's claims are under legal scrutiny and that we'll pursue charges of libel or extortion if necessary, we might neutralize some of the press interest. Melissa nodded. We want to be proactive. We won't let her control the narrative. Cynthia chimed in, placing a stack of her own notes on the table. Adrian asked me to run a discreet background check on Miss Pierce. We've learned she's in substantial debt evidence of gambling, lavish spending, and using older men as benefactors. It isn't conclusive, but it strongly suggests she's not pregnant, or, if she is, it may not be Adrian's. A slight wave of relief flowed through the room. If we can prove that, Joanna said, we can discredit her entirely. Melissa looked around at the assembly of supportive faces, grateful for their expertise. We need all the help we can get, she admitted. My main concern is also Adrian's well-being. He blames himself for ever being involved with her. I don't want him weighed down by guilt. Joanna reached out and covered Melissa's hand. We'll help you, but you need to be cautious too. If Loretta is desperate, she might act unpredictably. She might try to harm you or your baby. Melissa's stomach knotted at that dark prospect, but she took a steadying breath. I won't back down, she said. Not now. We'll do whatever it takes to protect our family. While Melissa managed the PR side, Adrian confronted the corporate ramifications. He set up an emergency meeting with Montclair International's board. They gathered on the top floor of the Montclair Tower in downtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city's bustling streets far below. Adrian stood at the head of a long conference table, addressing men and women in crisp suits who had a stake in the company's success. He explained Loretta's blackmail attempts, assured them of his innocence, and pledged to undergo any legal or public scrutiny required to prove it. Some board members were supportive. Others were clearly anxious about how the scandal could impact stock prices. A particularly sharp-tongued board member, Miss S. Caldwell, voiced her concerns bluntly. We can't risk damaging our brand. Adrian, if there's any sliver of truth in these allegations, it could cost us millions in lost investments. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. He forced them to relax. I understand the risk, but I assure you Miss Pierce's claims are baseless. We'll handle this with full transparency. If the board feels it necessary, I'm even willing to take a leave of absence until this is cleared up. A murmur spread through the room. In the corner, Montclair International CFO, Leonard Glass, raised a cautionary hand. Before we rush to that measure, let's see how the legal and PR strategies play out. Abandoning your position now might only fuel rumors. Adrian nodded, relieved at the reasoned approach. Outside, in the waiting area, Melissa waited, accompanied by Cynthia. When Adrian emerged, looking exhausted, he quickly explained the board's stance. Melissa touched his arm. We'll get through this, she whispered. I promise. Despite their efforts, Loretta refused to back down. Days later, a scandalous article appeared on a notorious gossip website featuring shadowy claims about Adrian's secret life and disputed pregnancies. The piece was riddled with speculation, unsubstantial quotes from anonymous sources, and references to documents that allegedly proved a pattern of hush payments. Melissa read the article in the Montclair library, heart pounding. She hated seeing Adrian portrayed as a philandering playboy. Even though the article lacked evidence, it managed to sow seeds of doubt in the public's mind. Later that day, the estate gatehouse buzzed. Loretta had arrived once again, but this time she was in hysterics, demanding entry. Adrian, furious that she had leaked stories to the gossip site, told security to keep her out. But Loretta wouldn't leave. She stood on the sidewalk outside the gate, screaming that she felt ill, that her baby was in distress, that she needed Adrian's help. Security cameras caught her shrieking as passers-by gathered. Determined to avoid a public spectacle, Adrian rushed out with Mr. Garrison to see if Loretta was truly in danger. Melissa insisted on going too. When they reached Loretta, she was kneeling on the sidewalk, clutching her abdomen. Her mascara ran in dark streaks, tears glistening. She moaned dramatically, "It's your baby. I'm afraid something is wrong." Adrian crouched to check if she needed medical attention. He turned to Mr. Garrison, "Call an ambulance." But Loretta grabbed his wrist. "No, I don't want an ambulance. Just take me inside. You can help me." Melissa's suspicion flared. Something about this seemed contrived. Loretta had no trouble making a scene, but refused real medical assistance. Still, seeing the gawking strangers, Melissa made a split-second decision. She didn't want Loretta fainting on the sidewalk, or to appear heartless in front of onlookers. So she and Adrian helped Loretta to her feet, guiding her past the gate and into the estate's small guest house, where staff could monitor her. In the guest house, Loretta lay on a cushioned chaise, eyes closed, breathing heavily. A staff nurse, Miss Caldwell, no relation to the board member, arrived to check her vitals. Loretta kept refusing hospital transport, insisting she just needed water and rest. Melissa stood in the doorway, arms folded, anxiety coursing through her. "Why won't you see a real doctor?" she asked. Loretta groaned. "Because there's nothing they can do about a threatened miscarriage if it's going to happen. I just need to rest." Melissa's gaze locked onto Miss Caldwell, who subtly shook her head. Her vital signs were normal, no sign of acute distress. This was an act. Adrian approached Loretta carefully. "If you're pregnant," he said gently, "we need to confirm if there's any risk to the baby. Let me call Dr. Ramirez or any specialist. You can't deny medical care if you're truly concerned." Loretta scowled, pressing a hand to her forehead in mock frustration. "Stop hounding me, Adrian. Why do you keep doubting me? Don't you care about our child?" But at that instant, Miss Caldwell walked back in, carrying a small device, a portable ultrasound that the estate's nurse sometimes used for pregnant staff members. "If you wish," she said politely, "we can do a quick scan here to ease your mind." Loretta stiffened noticeably. She began to stammer excuses. "I don't think that's necessary." "My doctor said." Adrian cut her off. "Enough. We're done playing games. Either we check now or you leave." Cornered, Loretta swallowed hard. She scowled at Miss Caldwell, then at Melissa. Her voice wavered as she tried to maintain control. "Fine," she snapped. "Let's get it over with." As Miss Caldwell prepared the ultrasound gel, Loretta lay back, lips pressed tight. Adrian and Melissa stood to the side, tension thick in the air. Minutes passed. Miss Caldwell moved the probe across Loretta's abdomen, her expression professional but perplexed. After a while, she looked to Adrian and Melissa, then cleared her throat. "I'm not seeing a fetus here," she said carefully. Loretta's face went pale. "That's not possible," she exclaimed. "You must not be doing it right." "My doctor said." Miss Caldwell tried again, adjusting angles. Finally, she stepped away. "I'm sorry, Miss Pierce, but there's no sign of a pregnancy." "You're not pregnant." Silence dropped like a hammer. Melissa felt an immense wave of relief, shock, and outrage all at once. Adrian's breath came out in a ragged exhale. Loretta shot upright, panicking, eyes darting wildly. "You're incompetent," she hissed at Miss Caldwell. "This device is broken." Melissa's voice came low, throbbing with anger. "Stop lying. You've been faking this entire time." At that moment, Mr. Garrison entered, holding papers retrieved from Loretta's bag. "Sir, madam," he said, offering the stack. "It looks like these are phony ultrasound images and forged medical files." The color drained from Loretta's face. She lunged for the papers, but Adrian seized her wrist. His voice shook with rage. "You lied to everyone. You were never pregnant." Loretta opened her mouth, floundering for a defense, but nothing came. In desperation, she screeched, "You have no proof I wasn't pregnant before." "Maybe I lost the baby recently." Melissa stared at her, pity and anger warring within. "Is this what you've stooped to, Loretta? You'd fake a pregnancy, blackmail us, threaten our future, just for money?" Loretta's breathing was rapid, her eyes blazing as she realized she was cornered. "You ruined everything, all of you," she spat. "All I wanted was a piece of what I was owed. Adrian used me years ago and tossed me aside." "Get out," Adrian said, voice raw. "And if you ever come near my family again, I'll make sure you pay for every lie. Legally, Miss." Caldwell summoned security. Loretta, in a wild attempt to save face, tried to gather her things. But with nowhere to turn, she surrendered to the inevitable. Shooting a final glare, she snapped, "This isn't over." But her bravado sounded empty, hollow. She fled the estate, security escorting her until she vanished through the gates. In the aftermath, Melissa found herself shaking with residual anger and relief. Adrian held her, murmuring apologies. Though none of it was truly his fault, Loretta's con artistry was a product of her own greed. Soon the press began receiving statements from Montclair International's PR team, clarifying that Loretta's allegations were baseless. Evidence of her forgery began circulating discreetly among reputable journalists, overshadowing the initial gossip story. Loretta, however, did not simply disappear. She posted frantic rants online, claiming the Montclairs sabotaged her, that the nurse at the estate was incompetent. But these wild accusations lacked credibility. More damning information about Loretta emerged: past lawsuits, estranged family members, outstanding debts. The once poised socialite was now cast as a schemer. Not long after Loretta's exposure, an investor from Montclair International recognized her name in a separate context. Loretta had apparently defrauded him years prior, soliciting money for a startup that never existed. He filed a new complaint with authorities. As if that weren't enough, her gambling debts caught up to her. One shady lender she borrowed from threatened legal action. With her reputation in tatters, Loretta found few doors open to her. She tried to blackmail other former lovers, but none had the wealth or guilt that Adrian possessed. Their attorneys swiftly rebuffed her. In a desperate attempt to save herself, Loretta tried to strike a deal with a tabloid offering more fabricated revelations about the Montclairs. Yet, by then, her credibility was destroyed. The tabloid's editors smelled a rat, and they didn't want to face a defamation lawsuit from the Montclair's well-funded legal team. Slowly, Loretta's world collapsed. She went into hiding to avoid public embarrassment and the mounting legal problems. One by one, her illusions of grandeur crumbled. Meanwhile, time marched forward. Melissa's due date arrived with the hush of a crisp morning. Adrian rushed her to Mount Sinai Hospital, guided by Dr. Ramirez and a team that stood ready to bring a new Montclair into the world. Melissa's labor was arduous, nearly 12 hours. Adrian never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement, and kissed her forehead when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. In that painful, vulnerable moment, Melissa understood how deeply she loved him and how precious their family was. At last, their son was born, a healthy, robust baby boy with a powerful set of lungs. When they placed him in Melissa's arms, tears glistened in her eyes. Adrian, too, was overwhelmed with emotion, pressing his lips to his wife's damp hair. "We did it," he murmured, voice choked with wonder. "He's here." Melissa gazed upon their child, feeling an indescribable warmth. In that moment, every fear, every threat Loretta had posed seemed distant. Their newborn son was safe, and they, as a family, felt invincible. Over the following weeks, the Montclairs settled into a new rhythm. Their estate was calm again, no more unexpected visitors, no more scandalous calls. Melissa spent most of her time nurturing their son, while Adrian balanced work and fatherhood, occasionally waking in the night to change diapers. The media frenzy surrounding Loretta's claims fizzled out entirely. Even the old gossip site that had published her story posted a retraction, citing a lack of evidence. Adrian's board breathed a collective sigh of relief as Montclair International stock rebounded, buoyed by a major hotel acquisition that overshadowed any lingering whispers of scandal. A month after the birth, Melissa received a phone call. When she answered, she was startled to hear Loretta's voice again, though it sounded small, desperate. "Melissa, I'm in trouble." Melissa's heartbeat quickened. "How did you get this number?" she asked, though a better question might be why Loretta was calling now. Loretta's voice shook. "It's the lenders. They're threatening me. I just need help. Money. I'll do anything. Just please help me pay them off. I won't bother you or Adrian ever again." A swirl of emotions coursed through Melissa: anger, pity, astonishment. After all the pain Loretta had caused, she dared to ask for a bailout. "My husband offered you a way out once," Melissa said coldly, recalling how Adrian was prepared to help her find legitimate work, pay her basic debts if she dropped her blackmail. Loretta had spat on that gesture. Loretta sobbed. "I was foolish, okay? I just wanted more. I deserve more after everything I've been through, but now they might hurt me." Melissa's patience wore thin. The memory of Loretta's brazen lies, the stress that threatened her own pregnancy, the heartbreak she caused Adrian, everything flared in her mind. "I warned you, Loretta," Melissa said quietly. "I told you karma would strike back if you kept this up. You wouldn't listen. And now you want me to fix the damage you brought on yourself?" Loretta said nothing, only quiet sobs echoing through the line. Melissa forced herself to remain steady. Part of her still had compassion, but she also knew enabling Loretta would only feed her toxic patterns. "Seek help from a legal aid service," Melissa said at last. "Try one of the non-profit organizations, or use your connections among the wealthy men you used to date. I have my own family to protect. You are no longer our responsibility." Loretta moaned, "Please, just," but Melissa ended the call. A strange sense of finality washed over her. She cradled her son in her arms, reaffirming that her duty was to her husband, her baby, and herself. Loretta's problems were of her own making, and the consequences were hers to bear. Weeks turned into months. The Montclairs watched their baby boy grow stronger, his bright eyes curious about the world. Adrian's business thrived, especially after the scandal died down. The Montclair philanthropic programs expanded, building children's libraries, supporting community centers, and funding scholarships, acts that reaffirmed what truly mattered to Adrian and Melissa: giving back. Melissa also recovered her own sense of independence, setting up a small, charitable foundation that championed maternal health care for disadvantaged women. Inspired by her own trials during pregnancy, she collaborated with Dr. Ramirez and the hospital staff at Mount Sinai to offer services for women facing high-risk pregnancies. Meanwhile, bits of news trickled about Loretta's downfall. She was sued by multiple parties, sank into debt, and eventually left New York. Rumor had it she vanished overseas, trying to start anew under a different name. One or two tabloids attempted to spin her story as a tragic cautionary tale, but the public had moved on. For Melissa and Adrian, life wasn't perfect. They still encountered hurdles in business, family challenges, the ups and downs of parenthood. But a weight had been lifted from their shoulders, replaced with a deep appreciation for each other. They had weathered a harrowing storm, learning that loyalty, trust, and love could triumph over the most vicious lies. Today, the Montclairs stand stronger than ever, no longer haunted by shadows of deceit, but fortified by their trials and the unbreakable bond of family. Melissa's fierce protection of her husband and child echoed far beyond the grand Montclair gates, showcasing the power of unwavering love in the face of betrayal. Their story reminds us that truth always finds a way to rise, no matter how tangled the lies become. If you enjoyed this dramatic journey and found inspiration in the Montclair's resilience, consider helping us spread the word. Share this video with friends, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories of courage, love, and justice. Your support ensures that we can continue bringing tales like this to light, proof that even in our darkest hour, hope and unity will prevail.